In this video, we'll briefly explore the role of the ego in our personality. The functioning of the mind, its cognitive processes, and other mechanisms are very complex and the subject of deep study by science. Understanding the fundamentals of key concepts will greatly help us, both in getting to know ourselves and in identifying patterns that reveal the character of the people we interact with. Understanding how others think, how they act, and why, and what they feel, will give us a significant advantage and great benefits in communication processes. The ego is a key concept in psychology. It is an entity that resides in our mind, a structure of the psyche that is formed through experience and interaction with the environment throughout a person's life. The ego is fundamental to understanding the mental maps of the Enneagram, a self-awareness tool that this channel focuses on. I'll include a link to the distribution list in the description, along with more details on how the Enneagram offers personal development insights for each personality type. The ego can be understood as a psychological construct, a character, in fact, that develops over the course of life to interact with its surroundings in a more or less adaptive way. Through socialization, cultural norms, and family expectations, the ego begins to form from childhood as the conscious identity of the person. But this identity, this character, is a product, it is the result of an inheritance. Personality will depend on the context and culture in which the individual has developed. We are thus the product of a collective unconscious, a cultural, historical, ethnic inheritance, experiences, acquired teachings, family status and much more, which results in each individual as a unique and unrepeatable blend. Well, the ego is ultimately the character that interacts consciously with its environment, conditioned by these inherited patterns, without necessarily having undergone rational or conscious reflection on them. Thus, the ego actually acts as an automatic program that runs based on information previously introduced and assimilated, without reflection, questioning, or any reasoning in many aspects. A large part of our decisions and behaviors are influenced or determined by these biases, which are nothing more than unconscious programming, for example, prejudices, internalized social norms that trigger automatic emotional responses. Cognitive biases are ultimately automatic patterns of behavior, inherited or unconscious, that the ego executes without deeply thinking about them. The iceberg theory, popularized by Freud, describes the human mind as an iceberg floating in water. The visible part represents our consciousness, that is, the thoughts and feelings we are experiencing in the moment. Just below the surface is the preconscious, which includes memories and knowledge we are not actively thinking about, but can easily access. The largest part of the iceberg is submerged in the unconscious, which contains repressed desires, past traumas, and forgotten memories. According to Freud, much of our behavior is determined by this unconscious, although we are not always aware of it. Thus, the individual acts as if running a software program on autopilot. What does this often lead us to? This biased perception, this thoughtless and irrational behavior, usually drives us to act as mere substitutes for the person we truly are when we connect with our being, our essence, our true nature. This is something that is clearly seen in each of the 9 personality maps of the Enneagram. Each personality type tends to behave based on how close or far they are from their true self and how trapped they are by the ego. Depending on their level of awareness, the person will be healthier, wiser, and more centered, or they will be more entrenched in ignorance, more lost, and more trapped by their ego. And this disconnection from our true self and nature, a life so far removed from what is natural to the human being in today's society, is one of the major causes of one of the greatest ills of the West, stress, which affects more than 90% of the population. The lack of reflection, the disconnection, and acting on autopilot, disconnected from our essence and nature. That's why introspection, self-awareness, and understanding others are fundamental in personal development for achieving effective communication and awareness. In Jungian theory, the ego represents the sense of the conscious self, that is, the identity with which we identify in daily life. The ego is related to our conscious perception of reality, our decisions, thoughts, and daily actions. It is the organizer of conscious experiences, the one that allows us to function in the external world. Jung also introduced the concept of the shadow, a shadow of fears, traumas, and insecurities. This refers to those repressed, ignored, or unrecognized aspects of the psyche. They are parts of the personality that are not aligned with the conscious image we have of ourselves and, therefore, are often rejected, hidden, or projected onto others. Jung believed that integrating the shadow, that is, making conscious what is repressed, is essential for the process of individuation, the journey towards self-knowledge and the full development of the self. We will explore this further in another video dedicated to the law of the mirror, as it is a powerful tool for bringing forward and reflecting aspects of our shadow, which, once identified, allows us to work on them. The shadow contains both negative aspects, such as fears, traumas, insecurities, and destructive impulses, as well as positive ones. It can also include undeveloped talents, unrecognized potential, and positive qualities that have been ignored, rejected, or repressed. The ego is ultimately this illusory self, a false concept of identity with which we find ourselves identified. But in reality, we are not that entity. It is simply a mask, an armor that functions as a defense mechanism determined by the instinct for survival. From childhood, the ego is formed as a shield underlying the instinct for survival. As the individual matures, they begin to disconnect from their true self, their essence, where happiness, love, and the innate wisdom with which we are all born reside. And in the process of socialization and maturation, in which the ego develops, the armor as a survival mechanism, many of us begin to identify with a character that we are not truly. A self that drifts further away from our being, an adapted self, a substitute for what we truly are when we connect with our essence. This set of beliefs, values, and aspirations, acquired unconsciously, determines even our accent, language, and way of thinking. It conditions, programs, and indoctrinates the character, the ego, distancing it from the true self. A false character is built, a substitute for the being, aligned with the values and beliefs of parents, and the social and familial environment in which we were born. The ego is egocentric, it wants reality to benefit it and not harm it. It is victimistic, always blaming others for its suffering and wanting external circumstances to change because confronting itself is hard. The ego is reactive, it is a slave to its surroundings, to circumstances. And ultimately, from the ego is forged what we call the shadow, the dark side. All our defects, our mediocrity, our emptiness, our traumas, our frustrations, our wounds, everything we condemn, reject, and don't like to see in ourselves. The ego, in the end, is the great jailer that locks us in the dungeons of our ignorance, distant from our true self, from wisdom, and from peace. The ego never has enough. It always wants more, and in doing so, it distances us from well-being, happiness, and peace, which are our true nature. Let's dive into self-awareness. Whenever you feel emotional or something within you is stirred, there is a deep truth within you. It is an opportunity to recognize that something is significant to you and that you need to act in alignment with it. Explore it. And how to explore yourself? Through a process of introspection. You can use the Enneagram as a map to find the path to your true self and your intuition as a compass. Whenever you feel emotional or something within you is stirred, there is a deep truth within you. Pulling at the thread, whether to heal yourself or to genuinely understand and direct your life, should be guided by what your heart tells you, not by unexamined beliefs or established standards you've adopted based on what is said to be the correct way to do things. Get into the habits of questioning everything, lifelong learning, sharing, and discussing. Self-sabotage, the constant bombardment of irrational and unreflective thoughts, can lead to chronic stress that eventually manifests as serious illnesses, such as cancer. Interesting studies link more than 90% of serious illnesses to chronic stress, one of the major ailments of the West. From the moment we are born, everything we do is in search of love and connection. We do whatever it takes to be loved. Deficits of love in the first 3 years of life are difficult to recover from. The level of affection we receive in childhood deeply influences our growth, the development of courage, happiness, enthusiasm, and resilience. We live in a society of fierce and cruel meritocracy, far removed from the true needs that make people happy, such as love, connection, and personal fulfillment, not money or power, for example. It's essential to ensure that we are not victims of limiting beliefs or cognitive biases. We need to research, reflect, and reprogram ourselves with wisdom. Making sure we place our ladder on the right wall is crucial. Ensuring that we live in connection with our essence, that we are true to ourselves and not just a socially adapted version, is key to achieving our happiness. In other videos, we will continue discussing other concepts drawn from psychoanalytic, humanistic, and transpersonal psychology that are relevant and traditionally used in personal development areas. We will talk about the law of the mirror, the ego's defense mechanisms, the inner child, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and other concepts that are important to understand both for applying in our own personal development and for achieving communication with others with awareness. I have created a distribution list for all the videos related to the Enneagram as part of a course designed to succinctly offer, let's say, the 20% of information that provides 80% of the benefit of this tool, based on Pareto's 80-20 principle. I'll leave the link in the description below. Stay tuned for updates on the Enneagram in the video description below. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it helpful. If you liked it, please give it a like. If you have any ideas or comments, please do share. See you in the next video.